Good evening again to your excellencies, distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Renee, the MC for today's lecture, given by Professor Raj, Chairman of the Indian Council of Ghanaian Studies. Before we begin the lecture, we would like to share a Malay traditional dance called Tarian Songket to be performed by Soka Gakkai Malaysia Dove Dance Group. Please give them a big applause. Thank you very much, Dove Dance Group. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as the lecture is going to begin soon, we kindly seek your cooperation again to have your mobile phones switched off or turn to silent mode. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the chairperson for tonight's lecture is Yang Berbahagia Dato Mahathir Shankar, who has served the Malaysian legal and judiciary for a good 40 years and retired as a Court of Appeal judge in 1997. During his course of career, he has been assigned to a gamut of legal issues and attended numerous legal conferences, both locally and internationally. He was one of the founder members of the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, established in 1999. Presently, Yang Berbahagia Dato Mahathir is an honorary fellow Presently, Yang Berbahagia Dato Mahathir is an honorary fellow of the Malaysia Institute of Arbitrators and is also a registered panel member of the Regional Centre of Arbitration Kuala Lumpur. In addition, he is a Paul Harris Fellow in Rotary International and was recently nominated by the Malaysian Human Rights Commission as its advisory jury to the Asia Pacific Forum and the chairman of the Gandhi Memorial Trust Malaysia. Without further ado, I would like to invite the speaker and the chairman to the stage. Please give them applause. I would now like to pass the floor to Yang Berbahagia Dato Mahathir Shankar.
Your Excellencies from the Corps Diplomatique and your esteemed ladies, Tan Sri, Puan Sri, Dato, Datin, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, fellow brothers and sisters from Soka Gakkai, Malaysia. It is my singular honor and privilege as chairman of the Gandhi Memorial Trust to chair this lecture by His Eminence Sri Neelakantha Radhakrishnan, who is undoubtedly Asia's most eminent luminary, who is a living embodiment of the principles and practices of that apostle of non-violence, Mahatma Gandhi. It is standard form on such occasions for the chairman to give a short account of the life and times of the speaker. I must tell you that I have found this a most daunting task. The biography of our distinguished speaker, with which I was supplied yesterday, runs into 27 pages. A shorter version, which I downloaded from the internet, runs into 9 pages. His book, which carries the same title as the lecture you are about to hear today, is 81 pages of closely packed facts and analysis, which it took me all of yesterday to read from cover to cover. How am I to compress all this information into a comprehensive 10-minute introduction is beyond me. Notwithstanding Napoleon's injunction about not fearing the impossible, I'm not going to attempt this feat. Suffice it to say then, for the moment, that since he obtained his postgraduate degrees in literature and communication in the early 60s, Professor Neelakantha Radhakrishnan has spent the next 44 years of his life campaigning and initiating training programs to mobilize youth for initiating meaningful, non-violent structural changes in the culture of civil societies the world over. The numbers are nothing short of awesome. He has, to his eternal credit, over 600 youth training camps in India and a further 20 camps abroad. He has lectured in over 40 leading universities all over the world, from Texas to Trivandrum. He is no stranger to Malaysia. In 2006, he delivered 5 lectures in local universities. The titles are very significant. 1. Redefining religious values and principles towards the struggle for global justice and peace. 2. The need for a universal spiritual and moral vision of global justice and peace. 3. Satyagraha and character development. 4. Gandhi and societal transformation. And 5. The need for a department of peace in each country. I'd like to put particular emphasis on that last subject on which he lectured, the need for a department of peace in each country. I am moving away from my notes here to say that why I put such emphasis on this subject is that every country in the world today has got its heaviest budget item on military hardware. Why they don't have a department of peace is beyond me, because that is the object they are trying to achieve. Professor has authored over 50 books in English and several books in the vernacular. He is trilingual. He writes and speaks Malayalam, Tamil, and Hindi. In addition to the Indian President's Award in 1991 for his initiatives in communal harmony, he holds 12 other awards of national and international standing received in Stockholm, Atlanta, and Tokyo. On an occasion such as this, I am much reminded of what took place when the American President Woodrow Wilson was asked to comment on his thoughts when he was presented with the book that won the Pulitzer Prize that year. He said, "If you don't mind, I'd rather have 5 minutes with the author. I'm afraid I can't ask the book any questions." This evening is a momentous milestone in the annals of Soka Gakkai Malaysia, because we are shortly going to hear our distinguished speaker for 60 minutes. And by way of a bonus, there will be a further 30 minutes for question time. Who would dare deny that we are going through a leadership crisis in Malaysia? And as for the truth, it will be the understatement of the year for me to say that the Malaysian public is very bemused by the rapidity with which statutory declarations are overturned overnight. Professor Neelakantham Radhakrishnan, your presence here this evening could not have been more timely. All of us in this hall are eagerly waiting for you to show us the way which was blazed for the world by 3 of its champions, Gandhi, King, and Ikeda. Please speak to us.
Very good evening to all of you. Mr. Chairman, Honorable Justice Mahadev Shankar, His Excellencies, the Vice Chairman, and other friends of the Sokha Gakkai Malaysia, very distinguished friends, fellow members and workers of Sokha Gakkai, brothers and sisters. Well, after a very long and exhaustive introduction by the distinguished President about me, I feel a little, to use a very mild term, bewildered whether I am worthy of those kind words. As a student of Gandhi, as an admirer of Martin Luther King Jr., and a profound admirer of Dr. Daisaku Ikeda, I thought that we should take maybe half an hour or 45 minutes to discuss some of the cardinal issues that confront us today and the leadership lessons that one can draw and learn from these very, very distinguished revolutionaries of our time. I don't know whether it is going to be a speech or sharing of ideas. I would very much like my presentation to be in the form of my own understanding of the contribution of these three great men of destiny to our times and their relevance to our own times. What are the lessons that we can draw from the glorious efforts of these great men who defied, who challenged the might of what you call insanity and also the oppression of both the systems and the mind? Let us begin with Mahatma Gandhi, who began his work right at the beginning of the last century, the 20th century, which rather set off new sets of strategies, new methods of individual empowerment, as well as turning the searchlight on to each of us and his own strivings for betterment of human being, not on the basis of anything profound, but those by the discovery of those profound truth lying deep within each one of us, as well as the capabilities that could be harnessed, which Gandhi himself called Swaraj. The term Swaraj in the Indian context, Indian language, has two connotations. One is a political meaning, political connotation, which could be explained as independence. Independence for the nation, which was at that time under the colonial yoke of the British Empire. But that apart, the manner in which Gandhi brought millions of people, millions of young men and women, particularly women, onto the street and enthused them, inspired them to stand up against injustice and fight for justice, which would be possible if only we conquer fear, the biggest enemy which each one of us has to encounter in our day-to-day life, whether one is in Malaysia or in England, India, or anywhere. Gandhi identified the biggest enemy. This is lesson number one. The biggest enemy a person has to encounter, has to recognize and to fight is his fear complex, fear of losing something, fear of being identified as a traitor, fear of being recognized as someone who will be identified by the forces that one has been fighting, whatever it is. He who can conquer fear will be the master or the mistress of his own or her own self. So says the Indian classic Bhagavad Gita. Taking lessons from that, Gandhi at that time, who began his work in 1903 in South Africa. He said, a people, a nation, a society has no redemption unless and until people stand up and tell the oppressor, look here, enough is enough. We have every right to live as normal human beings. Just because you are mightier, you are stronger, you are taller, or you are richer, or you belong to some other caste, do you think that you have every right to trample upon on our basic rights? Recognize us as human beings. Now, you and I are very conscious, very familiar with the expression human rights. And human rights violations are being discussed very hotly everywhere at all forums. And during the last at least 5-6 years, the largest number of books written on any subject is on human rights. Now it is a vogue. But then, at the turn of the last century, nobody talked about human rights and human rights violations. Suffice it might look that it was Mahatma Gandhi. I don't say this because I belong to his country or country of birth. Now, he is a treasure of humanity. Gandhi is no longer someone who belongs to India, any particular country. Nelson Mandela recently speaking at a conference in London, he said, my nation, people call me, describe me as the president of independent South Africa, the Republic of South Africa. But I would like to give credit to Gandhi. He is the father of my nation. Nelson Mandela said this. And to Indians, Gandhi is the father of Indian nation. And Nelson Mandela again said in 1994, the first time after he was released from 29 years of being in prison, the first country he visited was India, the very first country. He said, it's a pilgrimage to me to the land of Gandhi. And but for Gandhi and the lessons that I learned from Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Indian Prime Minister, we would not have taken non-violence as a strategy, a method, or a form of struggle against apartheid. So friends, what is to be learned? The lesson here is, while you should recognize wherever we are and whatever we are and whatever be our perceptions or preoccupations are, fear, so long as we are haunted by fear, so long as we are not able to conquer fear of various sorts, it begins even, the fear of this begins even when we are very young. It all begins with the fear of the shadows when we are young. From the fear of the shadows that we experience when we are young, as we grow up, these shadows also get themselves lengthened, right? And these shadows get into our being. And we become victims of this shadow. Vivekananda, another great Indian saint, he said, arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. There's only one moksha, there's only one salvation for humanity, that is, can't identify fear as something that dehumanizes us. Do we have the courage? It is this question Gandhi raised in 1906, when for the first time Gandhi coined the expression Satyagraha. And last year was the 100th anniversary of the Satyagraha movement. And all over the world there were small, medium, big programs to commemorate the Satyagraha centenary. The Satyagraha of Gandhi was a conscious effort to mobilize people, to make people realize that your fate, my fate, your right to live, my right to live, your right to grow, my right to grow decently and carve out our own life, our own destiny, cannot be hampered and cannot be obstructed by anybody. As the Buddhist texts say, the biggest gift mankind or a man or a woman has is the gift of life. The most sacred thing in life is this understanding. And who has the right? So stand up, identify. When Gandhi realized that many Asians have no right, practically no right, he organized women to stand up and march. Lakhs and lakhs of women in South Africa marched under Mahatma Gandhi and his wife and courted arrest against human rights violation. History books don't mention these things as movements towards ensuring human rights or movement or against human rights violations. That credit goes to others. Who writes history? History is always written by the victors, by the exploiters, by the powerful. No defeated nation, no defeated country, no defeated person has ever written the history of his country or his nation. History is always written by the mighty, by the powerful, and those who win. So, friends, the second submission that I would like to mention here about the lessons that one can learn from Gandhi is that we should never compromise on principles. You compromise on anything, but why should we compromise on principles? And if we compromise on principle, what is there to live for? The quality of life, the texture of life, the manner in which we win in life depends on our courage to identify values. It's not how we win. It is not what we win that matters. In this corporate value, in this atmosphere of corporate values where we are taught to believe when the going is